Cyberpunk 2077 is a game that we've been looking forward to for about 5 years. And with 2 delays this year, we are now finally approaching the release in a couple of months. What we love about Cyberpunk is that they've taken their time to make it. It's promising to be one of the best games released in quite some time. And the best thing as well is that there's not been too much released in terms of lore and characters and everything else. So what we want to look at is what we know so far, and what we do know is that it's set in a place called Night City.
So Night City is a city in the Free State of Northern California. It's located on the west coast of the United States in the Del Coronado Bay. As of the year 2020, it is said to have around 5 million inhabitants across its many boroughs, and in 2077 it was voted the worst place to live in all of America. It is a central location in the pen and paper RPG series Cyberpunk 2013, Cyberpunk 2020, and V 3.0, and also read the upcoming Cyberpunk 2077 game.
A planned urban community originally founded by Richard Knight in 1994, it was established at the head of the Del Coronado Bay and facing the Pacific Ocean to the west. Night City is a modern city of the 21st century. It has wide streets and ultra-modern towers, which is home to over 1 million people, with another 4.5 million people living in the Greater Night City metropolitan area. The areas in the Greater Metropolitan are known as Westbrook, North Oak, Haywood, Pacifica, South Night City, and Rancho Coronado.
Night City is a fun place to visit, as well as an exciting and vibrant place to live. Maybe not to grow up though. Its world-famous slogan is "The City on the Edge of Tomorrow." The city hosts around 9 million tourists at all times, conventioneers and corporate travelers every year. A planned city community with an advanced rapid transit system, its own net LDL, and a corporate center boasting representatives from over dozens of the world's greatest corporations. Technology triumphant over the troubles of the past United States of America, a combination of cultures of the old world and a new beginning of the US Night City is now.
New city Democratic mayoralty, easy for you to say, with corporate-controlled city council. Popular votes are cast via a data term using identity card registration software. The city council consists of a House of Representatives chosen by the top 10 largest corporations present in Night City.
So the mayors of Night City, I'm going to have a pretty hard time pronouncing both of these, but the first one is Bol Ebunaik.
Okay, I'll pronounce that one for you in a second, but you should get the next one.
Gavin Haakensen, pretty close. Yeah, that's. Yeah. I
think that's Finnish, which is not far off our original culture.
How do you pronounce the first one?
The other one, I would call it Bombole Ebunike.
Fair enough.
It's looks Nigerian. To me.
Something about around there. I'm probably should click on the wiki page and have a read of his lore, but for now, we'll come back to that.
Anyway,
so the business
you do realise that mispronouncing names is racist. Just want to say
true.
That.
Especially if you're from that part of the world.
Okay, yeah, we'll cut this out. Don't worry.
The business of Night City is technical, light industry, international trade, information services, electronic technologies, security services, and so on. While cities like Tokyo, New York, or Singapore have been overrun by corporations by the 2000s, Night City is the only city in the world that was built from the corporations. Some of the biggest mega corporations in the world contributed to the construction of the city, and many are located in the corporate center.
So some of the mega corporations of Night City include Arasaka, Militech, Orbital Air, Petrochem, and EBM. And we might just have we might just do a separate video on those mega corporations and what they do and how they function in the world, because I think that would be quite important to the game.
Specifically
video.
Yeah, specifically Arasaka, we'll have to do a separate video on them, because I know 100% they are very important to the story of Cyberpunk, and I'm sure they will be quite important in Cyberpunk 2077, so look out for a video on them for sure. So the following were some of the leading corporations that helped construct the city, but it's just a few of the ones that still operate in Night City to this day. The city is overrun by many corporations and businesses, some of which are exclusive to Night City. Without the official aid of the US government or the Free State, Night City is a free nation that sees little interference from the outside world. Night City's biggest ally, as I said just before, is Arasaka, which keeps the city running and protected.
So Night City is located on the central coast of the western United States. As negotiated in the Northern Separation Treaty of 2012, Night City is considered to be a part of the Free State of Northern California. That being said, access is guaranteed to travelers from the Free State of Allied Southern California.
Night City's Northern Californian location gives it one of the most pleasant climates in the western part of the US. Normal temperatures range from the mid 80 degrees Fahrenheit to low 50 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 26 Celsius to 10 Celsius, with misty white fog blanketing the city in the early mornings and evenings. Night City receives around 21 inches of rainfall each year. Of this water that drops, around 35% of it contains toxic chemicals, which is higher than the current government standards for the United States produced vehicles, clothing, and food. On average, if a person's vehicle and clothing are rated above SP12, adverse effects such as staining and ablation will be negligible.
When one visits Night City, they should wear light to medium weight clothing with a light armor jacket or ballistic cloth overcoat, which is optional. A filter mask and supplemental oxygen are highly recommended as well. This is a hedge against inversion smogs and acid rain fog. That being said, acid-proof slickers, umbrellas and air masks are readily available from the sidewalk vendors or smaller street stores during the smog warning periods. The average cost of these items can range from 20 to 35 EB. EB being, I think it would be like electronic.
I think it's eddies or
euro dollars.
I think,
yeah.
Also, just worth noting, I think the sort of acid rain is going to be featured in the game Cyberpunk 2077. I think it's pretty much confirmed already that that's a thing. So look forward to dealing with that in a video game. So on to Richard Knight. Night City was the brainchild of businessman Richard Knight, who became dissatisfied with his experiences in managing corporate construction projects as part of his company Halsey, Ferris and Knight. This led him to break off and form his own company, Knight International, with the end goal of creating the ideal city. Situated in the Del Coronado Bay, the city was originally going to be known as Coronado City, and Richard Knight envisioned it as a utopia in which cities across the country could look up to as the gold standard. After the collapse, many of the mega corporations also looked at creating such a space in which crime and poverty were non-existent, as well as laws that impeded their sometimes unethical work. By 1992, megacorps Arasaka, EBM, and Petrochem had all invested heavily in Coronado City. Knight purchased many of the rights as well as large swaths of land surrounding the Del Coronado Bay from Petrochem to secure the land for the new city. By 1993, the construction of the city was well underway, and the bay had been dredged and the upper peninsula had been extended. The existing residents of Del Coronado had been relocated to a new area known as Old Downtown, and the central hub of the city where the corporations were based would be the new downtown area.
So after the construction for Coronado City was already under its way, Knight International employed a large number of innovative building styles and techniques. This resulted in the exclusion of many old boy companies, including that of Halsey, Ferris and Skiv. During the first 4 years of construction, there were daily threats against Knight's life. Knight, being a very confident and proud businessman, dismissed the threats as easily as they came. When the threats escalated to the level of sabotage and intimidation, he made a few calls to his corporate allies who had experience in dealing with such things.
However, despite his influence and his allies promising to deal with it, Knight's luck finally ran out. On September 20th, 1998, Knight was found dead in his penthouse suite at the top of the newly constructed Parkview Tower. Detectives found his body with a bullet wound. He was killed instantly. Knight's killer was never found. To honor his memory, the newly appointed city council officially renamed Coronado City to Night City. The next 7 years...
Oh, sorry.
You go for it.
The next 7 years were chaotic as the powers that were battled for the power over the city. Or the powers that were battled for power over the city, The corporations controlled the civic government and the corporate centre. The mob controlled almost all service-related businesses. The city police, forced to kowtow to both mob and corporate interests, became totally ineffective. During this time, the gangs backed by mob and corporate sponsors established themselves in the remaining suburbs of the old city, the one area that had never had the chance to be added to Knight's urban plan. The result became the infamous combat zone of modern day, with gangs so firmly rooted that the only way to remove them now would be to demolish the entire area.
the mob rule. So by 2005, the mob had become the king of the hill. The corporations established their strongholds in the outlying Beavervilles and their lofty corporate plaza fortresses. They had little or no interest in running the city, and the civic leaders were unable to lead without corporate masters to pull the strings and provide the muscle. The next 4 years were the dark ages of Night City, with more murders in that 4-year span than there were for most cities in 10. The mob ruled the city with an iron fist, killing anything in its way. Gang activity was at an all-time high during this time, such as notorious gangs as the Blood Razors and the Slaughterhouse made their debut. Night City soon became the closest thing to hell on earth, a war zone where you were just as likely to have your car blown up as have its radio stolen. The number of unsolved murders documented by the police rose into the thousands.
The period between 2009 and 2011 was known as the Mob Wars. Night City had grown to be incredibly violent, with murder and gang activity at an all-time high. It is unclear whether the corporations attempted to deal with the mob, but it is known that the mob was bad business for the megacorps. The conflict came to an end when heavily armoured Arasaka paramilitaries took to the streets in a show of force, overwhelming the mob forces and leaving them effectively defeated.
The corporations installed puppets in the local government and began the process of cleaning up the war-torn city. Night City's homeless problem grew out of control when new laws stated that anyone without the finances to renovate their home would be removed. Almost all of the city's affordable housing was occupied by the Corps troops, resulting in the displacement of hundreds of residents. By the year 2020, the mob wars were a distant memory and Night City had become a relatively peaceful place, with the downtown area being policed at all times. However, many dangers still remain, and the scars of previous conflicts have not yet been healed. Weapons are commonplace in everyone's day-to-day lives, and it would not be out of the ordinary to see a gun next to a briefcase on the sidewalk. The newly elected council, faced with the chaos in the city, deputized corporate security forces and allowed them full authority within the city limits. The corporate and city centers were cleaned out and restored to their pristine state. The old Harbour Mall, originally built in the 1980s, was demolished and the new Harbour Mall constructed.
By 2013, much of the worst excesses of the city had been crushed under the ruthless heel of the megacorps. Basic services such as police, fire and support services had been re-established, and if the corporate masters were oppressive, at least to the average punk on the street, it was better than dodging gunfire on the way to the vended booth.
By 2020, Night City was a rapidly growing urban region, still rife with urban violence and street crime, but with strong economic growth in the corporate sector. It was the quintessential city of the future, gritty, dangerous, but possessed of an urban slick and stylish cool that made it unique. As Bez Isis, Net54 newscaster and one of Night City's most well-known public figure, put it at the time. Because of its free state status, Night City was home to units on both sides of the Fourth Corporate War. Perhaps as a result, the war was not kind to Night City. There was constant street-to-street, building-to-building fighting throughout the city, especially around the corporate zone where both factions maintained substantial office complexes. Even before the nuclear event that wiped the entire center out, people were abandoning the city in droves, doing whatever they could do to avoid getting sniped by drones, crushed by tanks, or just gunned down by the corporate kill squads. A big chunk of the city was wrecked and people were climbing all over themselves to get to safer spots like Haywood and Pacifica. Then both sides went over the line and some bright boy set off a bomb.
The Fourth Corporate War in 2022 was next, and in retrospect it was just Night City's bad luck that it was a free city in an area not controlled by a larger national power. Neither of the corporate combatants was stupid enough to drop a nuke in the middle of some place where the remnant US or the still powerful Euro theatre held the reins. In fact, probably the only thing that kept wiping out every Arasaka stronghold on Earth was the fact that Night City wasn't technically part of the US. And then the nuke was dropped. So the twin Arasaka towers were 140 floors tall, making them among the tallest buildings existent at the time. They were joined by a high bridge around the 60th floor mark. With the exact location of the Arasaka master database unknown, Militech decided the best course of action was to use a pocket nuke, which was carried by a hand-picked Black Ops team, to level the entire structure. The Militech team didn't really care about the loss of life, as they had already written the city off as a loss to Arasaka months earlier in the war. The bomb triggered in the Arasaka towers was roughly 25% as powerful as the bomb at Hiroshima, a tactical nuke a bit larger than a suitcase bomb. It was designed to utterly demolish the master database and make it unusable in any way to a rival megacorp. The nuke was prematurely detonated at floor 120, which was 1,200 feet, in Kei's apartments where the Soul Killer lab was located.
The blast pretty much obliterated the Twin Towers, splitting them in half and causing them to collapse outward. The entire center of the city became rubble in seconds. Most people in the area died instantly. A lot of Night City was built on fill because the original elevation was only 16 feet above sea level, so the Arasaka nuke caused a minor earthquake that liquefied part of the fill and flooded the inner city. The explosion was technically an air blast since the detonation went off at roughly 1,200 feet. Little Boy, by comparison, had a detonation height of about 1,900 feet. While this lessened overall long-term radioactivity, most of what remained penetrated only the huge skyscraper towers surrounding the blast. They were later scraped off and buried as fill in the bay. The high blast area and the tons of raw concrete and steel there were instantly converted into particulate debris, which rained down on the entire NorCal region and far out to sea for many months. The dust cloud spiraled up into the sky, turning it red for almost 2 years. Even several years after the blast, suspended particles caused the sky at dawn and dusk to glow a lurid crimson, inspiring people who lived through that time to call it the time of the red.
Now, after the fall, which was 2023 to 2025, Night City was inhabitable within 24 hours of the detonation. Many people were unaffected as they were heavily cybered up or had radiation filters installed in their bodies already. However, the nuke and its aftermath destroyed a large part of Night City's housing, forcing people to move out to the suburbs or to areas even further out from the city's centre. Worse, the liquefaction of the city was built on broke gas mains, water pipes and electrical grids. Streets became twisted chunks of asphalt, strewn with wrecked ground cars, while fallen ABs lay scattered among the debris of broken skyscrapers. Night City might technically be inhabitable, but it was far from pleasant. And even then, it wasn't as bad as some other cities like Rio and Hong Kong.
Much of the area beyond Greater Night City had been abandoned during the collapse, but now people started moving north, south, and east as soon as they could. Neighborhoods found a new unity and purpose, even if it was grudgingly built on a shaking foundation. They weren't looking for rebuild yet. They were looking for food, clean water, and shelter. In a wasteland of ruins, gangs, renegade, corporate fighters, and radioactive wreckage, the denizens of Night City were in survival mode. And survival is what the inhabitants of Night City do best.
So in the 2030s, President Kress blamed the Night City attack on Arasaka, although she was soon able to determine that the actual weapon used had been supplied by a Militech strike team. The big lie was that Arasaka blew up the corporate center in an area denial attack to stop Militech from seizing the Arasaka's Night City office. In a point of fact, Arasaka did actually have a much larger thermonuclear device buried in the foundations of the towers for just that reason, but the explosion of the Militech pocket nuke rendered this plan inoperable. No one knows where the Arasaka bomb actually wound up after the fall of the towers, and since only a few of the upper echelon of the Zaibatsu, such as Kei and his father Saburo, even knew about the fallback, the knowledge of the Arasaka weapon has since passed into the realm of legend.
Very few people knew anything about the Militech-backed strike team or its composition. Rumor has it that the veteran solo Morgan Blackhand, operating as a hidden government asset, passed the information about the failed raid onto President Elizabeth Kress independently. This is still only in the realm of legend, as no one has seen Morgan Blackhand or his corpse since the fall of the towers. In any case, Kress used this and the reactivation of General Lundy's commission to gain leverage over Militech, bringing it to heel and nationalizing its assets as part of the research and US government. Bringing the full force of her military and propaganda resources to bear, Kress painted a lurid picture of Arasaka as an evil foreign megacorp run by a madman who wantonly destroys an American city in the pursuit of personal power. Arasaka's charters to operate in the United States were immediately revoked, its members and board declared terrorists, and its assets either seized or driven offshore.
Yet for all of this political theatre, Kress showed little or no interest in helping Night City recover. Much as previous presidents during the collapse had done, she wrote the city off as unrecoverable and offered sanctuary in the new United States to the surviving refugees. There were two reasons for this. First, with the resources of the United States already stretched to the breaking point, there really were very few options left to Cress. And second, the flinty and far-sighted American president saw this as the perfect way to bring the wayward free state of NorCal and its lucrative technology base back into the government's control. But stubborn to the end, Night City fought back.
So in the 2040s now, roughly 2 million people in the greater Night City region were left homeless due to the bomb, either directly or because of the flooding from the liquefaction of the city's foundations. Survivors fled into overcrowded tent cities in the surrounding suburbs of North Oak, Westbrook, Pacifica, Haywood, and South Night City. The tent cities aren't real homes, and it was obvious that something needed to be done fast.
So the remnants of the Night City government turned to outside resources, calling in old markers and favours from a wide variety of edge runners. Recovery was led by the nomads of the Aldecaldo clan and their allies in the StormTech Corporation. With a lot of experience in city rebuilding due to the Chicago project, StormTech and the Aldecaldos were uniquely equipped to construct extensive temporary housing from shipping containers and later formocrete modules brought in by rail and sea.
First, the ground needed to be cleared to put up even these rudimentary structures. Most of Central Corp Zone had been destroyed. The wreckage was far too vast to dig up and cart to distant landfills, so the survivors used bulldozers and jury-rigged main battle tanks, abandoned by both sides, to shove the debris into the bay. Most of Night City's in neighborhoods had already been razed to the ground in the ceaseless battles preceding the fall of the towers. Now the wreckage became the new land that the new mega buildings and old cityscapes rose upon, once more ready to challenge the smog-filled skies. And the building keeps going on, despite gangs, plagues, riots, and all the other inconveniences that are just another part of the time of Red.
This ongoing rebuilding period had also cemented Night City's relationship to the outer world. Abandoned by President Cress and her new United States, Night City has no intention of ever yoking itself to that tottering governmental shibboleth again. Cress's successors are going to be in for a really long and ugly war if they want to take this particular free zone back into the fold. Frack, they might even ask Arasaka for help if it comes to that. I didn't realise this was Battlestar Galactica. It's the word frack. As for the European theatre, the Euros can go their own way just as long as they don't mess with Night City's particular path. Like a cyber fighter who's been hit, knocked down, and has risen again with a scream of heavy metal rage, Night City has dreams. It dreams of becoming the biggest, baddest, most important city on the planet one day. With all that happened during the war, Night City realigned with Arasaka rather than Militech and the new United States. So the next section that we potentially had were like some of the zonings. We might kind of skip that for this episode as it's not so it's probably not so necessary. But that's pretty much that's pretty much a bit of the history, I think, so far of what we know of Cyberpunk. I think that all the way up to basically the modern day. Obviously, there's a bit of a gap between the 2040s and 2077, although I think that some of that will get filled in during the in-game experience.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the point, is that the lore sort of cuts off, so a lot of what we'll find out is when we play the game. In terms of the individual zones of Night City, I'm sure we might come to cover some of those in the future, and I think the reason we want to split that out of this main Night City video is because each zone has a lot of important information, such as the gangs that are operating there and, the people who are in the most power there. And we'd rather cover that on their own sort of shorter videos rather than sort of stuff them into the end of this one. So I guess the last thing we have here is a bit of trivia. So according to Mike Pondsmith, who's the creator of Cyberpunk, Night City was created on the bones of Morro Bay, a town I often drove through on my various road trips. I like the place, and in one of those flights of fancy young designers have, I wonder what it would take to buy the whole thing. The basic structure is still there in the Night City map, if one allows for an impressive amount of fill required to build out the upper area around the rock. This is not unthinkable. A large amount of downtown Seattle and San Francisco were both built on fill. I actually have a map that shows how the whole thing goes together geologically. One day I'll have to post it. So I guess Night City was sort of something that creator thought of long before he thought of Cyberpunk itself. So he sort of he based a lot of his ideas on something that was sort of dear to him in the past. So I think that's pretty cool. And I'm sure in the game we'll see a lot of that sort of stuff, because I know he's working with CD Projekt Red to bring the world of Cyberpunk to life. So hopefully everyone's as excited as we are to see the world of Night City come to life in game.
Yep. Until our next Cyberpunk lore video, we'll see you then.
See you next time, guys.